Hello everyone. Today I'm going to review a book called Painting Calm by an artist called Inga Buividavice. This is a request from one of my lovely subscribers. There are 160 pages. The format of the book is quite small, just 7 by 9 inches. I would have liked it to have been at least A4 size really, because it does make it difficult to keep the book open and flat, so I'm having to hold the pages down while I'm reviewing this. As you can see, the inside, front and back covers have the colour swatches of the paints Inga has used. They are identical. So we have Painting Calm, Connect to Nature through the Art of Watercolour. We have the contents page, and in the book there are 4 projects. And in the introduction, Inga explains how she became a watercolourist and how spending time in nature has a positive effect on her mood and well-being, and tells us that when you spend time to really look at nature, you notice many aspects that you will not have seen before. In your creative journey, Inga tries to manage your expectations, the difference between your skill and your ability to make something you like, stating it takes time and practice to close this gap and not to expect your first pieces of art to be masterpieces. She goes on to say that many people quit during this stage because they doubt their ability to create something they like, and this is a big mistake, and what you really need to do is to keep practicing. She also emphasises that nothing in nature is perfect, and therefore we need to stop chasing perfection, because that's truly daunting for an artist and will only lead to discourage you. In the Getting Started with Watercolour section, which is aimed really at beginners, Inga gives some advice about choosing watercolour paint and goes on to discuss brushes, the different shapes and the marks they'll make. There are some simple mark making exercises to try and a list of other supplies that Inga uses that you may find helpful. I love Inga's description of watercolour techniques. She says, learning watercolour techniques is like learning chords. Once you've mastered them, you can play any song you like. Or in the case of watercolours, you can transfer your ideas to paper more easily. I think that's a wonderful description. It's probably one of the best I've read, actually. Inga illustrates wet on dry, wet on wet, and effects such as glazing, pulling and lifting out. This brings us to a page about cauliflower or blooms. People either love them or hate them. I very much like them myself personally. Shirley Trevenna often included them in her watercolour paintings. I've included a link to Shirley's book, Taking Risks with Watercolour, below. Here Inga explores the interaction between different pigments of paint. Inga explains colour can be used to make a statement as an artist. I think this is very true, as you can often recognise an artist by the colour palette. Here we have very important notes on how to neutralise a colour to create subtle effects and the difference between warm and cool. Inga talks about the different colour harmonies and illustrates 2 of her favourites. I love the colours in this example. They're so delicate and pretty, and I love how they blend together. Watercolour paint looks very different when it's wet compared to when it's dry. Having a library of colour swatches is a really useful way to help you choose the right colours to include in your work. And beautiful paintings can be achieved by limiting your palette. You don't always need a rainbow of colours to produce something lovely. This is a fun exercise, painting cacti. And practice techniques by just using simple shapes. Here are a few simple exercises to experiment with texture. Inga collects objects and uses them as inspiration in her work, such as pressed flowers and plants, and demonstrates how a simple item such as a single leaf can be used to create repeating motifs and an interesting painting. I love the way the colours blend together in this piece and how the texture has been applied. It's really lovely. Here Inga demonstrates how she's created patterns using a single or two objects and explains how she uses her sketchbooks to record her ideas. The next few pages explore composition and how a good composition is essential for a pleasing work of art. We look at static and dynamic compositions using line and the rule of thirds, where to place certain things in your painting to draw the eye, and how to map out a focal point using thumbnails and how geometry can support the composition. This brings us to the project section of the book. There are 4 project themes: foliage, flowers, light, and structure and symmetry. The first project, focusing on foliage, takes us through different seasons. So we have winter, spring and summer, and autumn. And in the final project in this section, Inga explains how to create a leaf mandala, which is the image on the cover of the book. Lovely rich colours. We now have a section on painting different types of trees with all their different shapes, which goes into a project painting a forest, a misty forest, using cold colours. In the flowers project section, Inga tells us that painting flowers is a perfect way to express yourself creatively because their shapes are very forgiving and you don't have to be too exact when trying to depict a flower. It will still resemble one, leaving you free to concentrate on expressing your emotions and getting pleasure from the process. The next few pages illustrate how we can put all this together to create interesting compositions in a final painting. There are some examples of lovely colour combinations, some of which I think are quite unusual. Just look at the beautiful rich colours in this semi-abstract painting. In the project section on light, Inga explains how an interesting use of light will bring focus into your subject and add emotion and drama. It makes something stand out in your painting when everything else looks the same and creates intrigue and allows you to tell a story. Symmetry occurs everywhere in nature, and in this chapter, Inga provides us with some creative ideas for how we can use symmetry to create lovely pieces of art, and how you can instantly elevate your artwork by introducing a frame. In final thoughts, Inga provides us with some practical tips and tricks to help us build a creative practice, such as having a dedicated space, have your supplies ready, ease yourself into it with simple exercises, and just practice mindless sketching. Inga advises to always have a project in process. You can use your previous work and build on it. And she states, the great creative journey is ahead of you, and it starts with you picking up a brush. The further reading and resources pages are very interesting. Inga has made suggestions of other books you might like to read, things you might like to watch, podcasts and music you may wish to listen to, and some art supplies. Hello, I hope you enjoyed my book review. I hope you've got something out of it and you found it a bit useful and helpful to you. Inga started painting in 2018 when she had a baby and was on maternity leave. She's originally from Lithuania, now based in the UK in a city called Liverpool. It's a beautiful city if you ever visit the UK, if you're not from the UK. Lots to see and do. And of course, the Beatles came from Liverpool. So I very much think the book is for complete beginners to watercolour, especially if you like flowers and nature. I think it's a very useful book to own. My only complaint is the fact that it's quite thick, and it was very difficult to sort of keep the pages flat while I was reviewing it. They kept springing up. So if you were working from it, you'd have to weight them down, really. But it is very much aimed at beginners. Inga does have a course on Domestika. I have mentioned Domestika courses before, but for less than £6, British pounds, you can have a complete workshop and course with Inga, which you might be interested in. Excellent courses, very good value for money. The other book, I have reviewed this one already, this one, Creative Abstract Watercolour. Again, useful for beginners, but more abstract. So less about flowers and nature and more about abstract patterns. Either of those, I think, make excellent books for beginners. And I put a link to that book review in the description below. And for people who are already experienced with watercolour and have been using it for a while, I did review this book by Shirley Trevenna. It's slightly, I mean, a beginner could use this book and learn a lot from it, but some more advanced techniques and just generally not aimed at beginners, that book. I'm waffling again, aren't I? So yes, if you're a complete beginner to watercolour, I think you'd like that book. It's got some lovely use of colour in it, very unusual and very different to the Creative Abstract one. So I've put links below to the Domestika course, as I've already said. Inga's got an Instagram page, you can check her out there, and there's also a blog article about Inga and her work as well. So what I'd like to say to you now is if you have a request, this was a request from one of my few lovely subscribers. If you do have a book request, I'd love to review it for you. And if you like the video, please, I know everybody asks for this, but if you give it a like, YouTube will recommend the video to other people and they might find it helpful as well. So until next time, happy painting.